This video is an introduction to ADHD, but before we get into things, I want to give you 3 tips to get the most out of this video if you are an ADHDer or if you suspect that you may be. Firstly, adjust the playback speed to either 1.5 or 2 times the regular speed, and I'm going to stick up a video on screen that goes over how to do that. As an ADHDer, you will have a beautiful brain that thinks a darn sight quicker than I speak, and adjusting the speed by 1.5 or 2 times will give my voice a chance to compete with the speed of your thoughts. We'll talk about an interest-led brain later on in this video as well, and the second thing that increasing the speed does is makes it a little bit more challenging to listen to, and things that are challenging can be more engaging and easier to focus on than videos that are less challenging to listen to. My second tip is that you may be passively watching this. For example, it may be that you are listening to it as a podcast while you are on a walk or something, or it may be that you're actively watching it. And if you're actively watching it, I have written a blog post which has pretty much all of the information written a little bit more concisely on it available on my website. That's www.simonslistening.co.uk, or there is a link in a doobly-doo. Reading along whilst watching this video is helping you to take in the content with your eyes as well as with your ears. As a dyslexic, whenever I go to a talk or a lecture, I tend to write notes. I never read through those notes. It just slows my brain down enough in order to be able to take in the words. It's using my eyes, my fingers, my ears. So that's the point in this second tip. It's about trying to engage other senses to get the most out of this talk. And then my third and final point is to watch this video however you want to. You'll notice that there are timestamps that break it up into little sections, and I will go over the content of this talk in a second. So skip ahead if you want to a section that you think applies more to you. Skip sections, feel free to rewatch stuff. Watch it in a way that works for you. I am not offended if you don't watch the whole thing. Content. First up, we will look at that medical term ADHD. We'll write it out, break it down, ask some questions around it that give us a bit more of an understanding of the condition. Secondly, we will look at the 9 diagnostic criteria for both impulsive and for inattentive ADHD. And that will give you a sense of whether or not you are an ADHDer. It won't formally diagnose you, but it will give you an indication. After this, we will cover all 8 of the executive function skills, which are impacted by ADHD. We'll next look at the interest-led brain, then a whole host of other ADHD traits that we haven't yet covered. We'll look at comorbidities, other conditions and neurotypes that are common in ADHD. We will talk about the social model of neurodiversity. And then I'll finish up by giving a bit of credit and references and talking a little bit more about myself and my practice. So, part 1, beyond the label. And my first question is, what does ADHD stand for? That's right, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So let's look at that label and unpick it a bit. First up, let's talk about the / in between the AD and the HD. Back in 1967, there was no AD, it was just HD. Then the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, updated in 1980, and at that point, Attention Deficit Disorder, ADD, was added. And then finally, in 1987, we got the word that we have today, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and ADD became an old diagnostic term that's not used anymore. So is this one neurotype or 2? The attention deficit refers to the inattentive type of ADHD, which I'll go into more detail around later, and that makes up around about 30% of ADHDers. The hyperactive or impulsive type makes up around about 10% of ADHDers, and that's the hyperactive disorder part. If your maths is any good, you'll realise that I've only accounted to about 40%. The other 60% of ADHDers are combined. They're both inattentive and impulsive. They are attention deficit and hyperactive. And so there's an awful lot of crossover. And when I go through the diagnostic criteria, you'll notice that there's, again, crossover between the two. So it's one neurotype and two neurotype and both all at the same time. Secondly, let's look at the word disorder, a bit of a bugbear of mine, and you'll see this under a couple of neurotypes like autism spectrum disorder. So ADHD, is it a disorder? On the yes camp, under the Equality Act 2010, ADHD is recognised as a disability. In order to get diagnosed with ADHD, the diagnostic criteria that I'll go over in the next section need to be causing actual impairment in your life. So it needs to be actually causing some issues. And it's also a neurodevelopmental condition which impacts on brain development of executive function skills, so much so that they will develop 30% slower, and by aged 30, executive functional skills will be developed at 75% of the capacity of a neurotypical. In the no camp, it's not a disorder, it's a neurotype. You're neurodivergent, not defective. You're trying to operate and live in a world which is designed for neurotypical people, which you are at a disadvantage of. And there are many positives, such as creativity, such as divergent thinking, that come with being an ADHDer. You may have also noticed at this point that I'm using identity-first language rather than saying somebody has ADHD. I'm saying somebody is an ADHDer. And that's because ADHD is such a big part of somebody's identity that if you were to remove it from them, you would be changing their whole brain makeup. They would be a completely different person. And so from that front as well, it feels pretty unethical to call someone's neurotype their way of being disordered. It's not defective. And the final thing in this title, this label I want to draw attention to, is the word attention deficit. Are ADHDers deficient in attention? No, they're not. No, their minds work really quickly. There's a lot going on for them. There is a lot of sensory information flying through their brain. It's not that they are deficient in attention, it's that they struggle with regulating their attention because there is so much to pay attention to. Part 2, the 9 diagnostic criteria. When I have run this talk for groups, I have brought with me 2 different types of sweets, say wine gums and then mints. And as I read out the criteria, you could collect them and see how many you've got, which gives a wonderful visual representation of how much this might impact on you. Might be you want to pause the video, get 2 different things, maybe raisins and Cheerios, for example, and do the same thing. Or it might be you want to count them on your fingers or in your head. I am not a psychiatrist, I'm not a registered professional who can diagnose you with ADHD. So I'm going to go over the diagnostic criteria, and from this I'm hoping that you can get a flavour of what ADHD is and indications of whether or not you have inattentive, impulsive or combined. But what you'd want to do really is to go to your GP and get on the waiting list for the NHS, the right to choose, or to pay for a private diagnosis if that's the route you want to go down. So, to be diagnosed with ADHD, these 9 criteria for each of those 2 things must be present for more than 6 months. They must be developmental rather than something that you have acquired, i.e. they must have been with you since before you were 12. They need to be best not explained by another medical condition like trauma, for example. They need to be causing you very real-world impairment. They need to be present in at least 2 or more settings, so you can't just be having ADHD symptoms at school or just at home. It needs to be in 2 or more settings. Otherwise, it might be explained by the setting itself. And they need to be diagnosed by a trained, licensed health professional. Around about 2 to 5% of adults are ADHDers. 30% of those inattentive, 10% impulsive, the rest combined. I'm now going to read out the 9 diagnostic criteria for inattentive, the 9 diagnostic criteria for hyperactive also. If you are under 17, you need to be able to tick 6 of those in order to meet the diagnostic thresholds. If you are 17 or over, as an adult, you would have masked an awful lot of these symptoms and they would present differently for you. So rather than 6, you need to tick 5 of them. So, sweets at the ready to collect. Here are the 9 inattentive traits. Number 1. Often fails to give close attention to detail or makes careless mistakes in schoolwork, at work, or with other activities. 2. Often has trouble holding attention on tasks or play activities. 3. Often does not seem to listen to when spoken with directly. 4. Often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace, e.g. loses focus or gets sidetracked. 5. Often has trouble organising tasks and activities. 6. Often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to do tasks that require mental effort over a long period of time, such as schoolwork or homework. 7. Often loses things necessary for tasks and activities, e.g. school materials, pencils, books, tools, wallets, keys, etc. 8. Is often easily distracted. And 9. Is often forgetful in daily activities. So that will give you an idea of whether or not you are an inattentive ADHDer. Next we'll do impulsive, otherwise known as hyperactive, and if you meet the threshold for both of them, then you are a combined ADHDer. So, sweets at the ready for the 9 diagnostic criteria of the hyperactive, otherwise known as impulsive ADHD. And again, you need 6 if you're under 17 or 5 if you're over. Number 1, often fidgets with or taps hands or feet or squirms around in their seat. 2, often leaves their seats in situations when remaining seated is expected. I'm also going to add on at this point that with the hyperactive types, as people age, they're quite often masked, so there might be more a feeling of restlessness or wanting to get up and leave the seat, but masking that and staying. Anyway, number 3. Often runs about or climbs in situations where it is not appropriate. Again, in adults, this may be limited to a feeling of restlessness. 4. Often unable to play or take part in leisure activities quietly, and it's the quietly that's the key word. 5. Is often on the go, acting almost as though driven by a motor. 6. Often talks excessively. 7. Often blurts out an answer before a question has been completed. 8. Often has trouble waiting their turn. And 9. Often interrupts or intrudes on others. They butt into conversations or games. If you want any more time to look at those criteria for both types of ADHD or combined, I've stuck all 18 of them up on the screen feel free to pause it or take a photo. You may have also noticed at this point that you can very much pick and mix different ones of these, which means that no two ADHDers are exactly the same. They will resonate with different parts of this, and it's going to get even more complicated as I move on to talk about executive functions and other traits associated with ADHD. But my hope is that in looking at these criteria, you will have a bit of a sense of whether or not that label of ADHD applies to you. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition affecting brain development in areas related to executive function, as well as affecting the susceptibility to different neurotransmitters such as dopamine. Probably sounded quite smart there. To make executive function a little bit more relatable as a term, let's break it down into the 8 individual tasks of executive function, and that will help us get a bit of a better understanding of the impact of ADHD. And the first of those 8 traits is working memory. If I asked you to remember a number sequence, 9186, that would be memory, your short-term ability to hold 9186 in your mind. Working memory is the ability to hold that bit of information, but also be able to manipulate and work with it. It's not just copy and paste, it's more like holding it and changing it. So if I asked you to take that number I just gave you and to tell me what it was backwards, then you would have both held that number, 9186, I don't know, I've forgotten it, and be able to tell me what it was backwards as well. The second executive functioning skill is self-monitoring. The ability to be aware of our thoughts, our behaviours, our feelings, being able to evaluate them, to give ourselves feedback and edit them. The third is around self-control, around our inhibitions, around impulses, being able to hold back, to delay gratification, to not act on our impulses. Our fourth is around emotional regulation. ADHDers can be beautifully vibrant, sensitive people who are very much in touch with their feelings, but their feelings can also be quite large and impactful. Emotional regulation is about being able to contain and not feel quite as overwhelmed by our emotions. 5 is around flexibility, being able to shift between tasks, particularly if we're experiencing hyperfocus, adapt when routines change, and being able to thrive without schedules. 6 is about planning, prioritizing, and time management. It's about time perception, about being able to estimate what our focus will be like and how long tasks will take, and being able to prioritize deadlines based on how urgent they are or how important they are. 7 is around task initiation, particularly on tasks which don't match with an interest-led brain. It's about overcoming procrastination and being able to start on certain tasks or activities. And then finally, number 8, organisation. The ability to organise attention, impulsivity, tasks, to be structured and organised. It's the thing that impacts on how messy our room might be, for example. So those are the 8 executive functions. And just as you saw the 9 criteria I went over for each of the 2 types of ADHD, I talked about there being spiky profiles, that each individual be unique. Each of those 8 executive functions will impact on different people in different ways, with different people having different challenges with different ones of them. And for each of those 8, there are techniques, tips, apps, things that you can use to help to progress with those executive function challenges. Section 3, the interest-led brain. The interest-led brain is 4 different motivators that really drive an ADHD brain. And it's all about working with those motivators rather than trying to work against them. I want you to imagine that you're trying to force yourself. Focus, stop procrastinating, sit still. Imagine you're trying to force yourself, and just how much resistance, how much frustration, how much self-blame and how much fatigue might come about because of that. Instead, if we can work out the drives of an ADHD brain, the things that push us to progress and flow with them, or even be able to add these elements to tasks which we might be putting off or struggling with, then it can be a little bit like adding spice to a bland meal. And then all of a sudden these tasks that were difficult become easier. The ADHD brain is firstly led by interest. Doing those things that you can hyperfixate on, those things that are interesting, exciting, your passions, your special interests, doing the things that make you tick, that you enjoy. Secondly, being led by novelty. That's doing things that are new, that you haven't done before, that give you a little bit of a rush in the newness. There's an excitement from trying something extraordinary. Third, from doing things that have a challenge to them. Not so much of a challenge that it's crippling, but in some way that there is a challenge to it that makes it slightly more difficult and so adds a bit of a hit to the task. And fourth, doing things that are urgent, the deadlines that are running out and about to expire. And I said that you can add all of these like spices. So, for example, on challenge, with making this video today, I could say, how much can I do in 1 hour? How much editing can I get through before Tuesday's done? For urgency, I could say, no one's monitoring or expecting me to get this video out at a certain pace, but I'm going to set a deadline and say it needs to be done by Saturday. And so all of the little tasks around video production are flowing out of the urgency, the deadline that I've created, even though there isn't actually a deadline, no one's holding me to account. Around interest, I have found this a really interesting topic to research. I am generally quite interested in autism, and many ADHDers are ADHDers. There's lots of things that genuinely catch my attention and make the act of making this video interesting. And on novel experiences, I have tried out changing my top after each shot, for example, that just creates a bit of novelty and makes it new and exciting and keeps it fresh, so I'm not just holding my phone up with my camera on my messy desk talking to myself. So if there's a task you're struggling with, maybe you're procrastinating or struggling to organise it or stay focused on it, how could you add your interests, some novelty, challenge or urgency to make that task just one rung of a ladder easier than it is at the moment? This next section is on some other ADHD traits, and it might feel a little bit disjointed, disorganised. I'm pulling a fair few different traits from different places, but I just want to try and encapsulate some of the things that haven't already been covered by the executive function, by the diagnostics, or by looking at the interest-led brain. And the first one I want to talk about is rejection sensitivity, or rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Dysphoria meaning strong emotion. I want to give you a little bit of a sneaky peek at one of my shorts. If you follow me already, you will realise that I am mostly a shorts channel. I make 3 shorts a week, and this is a short that I have scheduled in for September the 11th. So I'm going to play it, and it talks a little bit about why ADHDers may be more sensitive to rejection than neurotypicals. ADHD and criticism. ADHDers can often struggle with criticism. There's even a term for it, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means a real strong emotional reaction to a perception of criticism and avoidance of situations that might lead to it. Now, emotional control is an executive function that can be difficult in ADHD, but there might be other reasons for sensitivity to rejection. Dr. Sharon Saline, a child psychologist, did a
poll and estimates that for every one positive comment an ADHD child receives, they receive another 15 negative comments. Look at what I've drawn. Imagine that was your childhood. Sit down, pay attention, stop daydreaming, stop fidgeting. That's what you've grown up with. Not praise, not compliments, criticism. Are you sensitive to rejection, or have you been rejected too much?
Rejection sensitivity isn't formally part of the diagnostics for ADHD, but it is really common. In this video before, I mentioned it being about strong emotions, but people I've spoken to describe it as much stronger than just a emotional feeling. It can almost be painful, devastating, like struggling to find the words to describe either rejection, a perception of rejection, or anticipating rejection that might be to come. Understandably, this can have massive impacts on your social life, your relationships, your perceptions of people, and even just whether or not you feel confident or not to go out and be around people. It might result in people-pleasing, withdrawal, and huge amounts of perfectionism. The next trait I want to talk about is demand avoidance, and you may have heard this described in a clinical way, pathological demand avoidance, which we can rebrand in a slightly more affirming way to call it a persistent desire for autonomy. Demand avoidance is common in ADHD, and it's an entire profile, PDA profile, in autism. It's also something that anyone, a neurotypical, would respond to. For example, if I said to you, go and tidy this room, or go and do this, if I told you to do something, you'll quite likely meet me with some kind of resistance at being told what to do. But with PDA, this is much stronger. And the example I gave was with external demands, so someone tells you to do something and you resist. Whereas demand avoidance can also impact on internal demands. For example, you must go to sleep at 11 p.m. and somebody who has a PDA profile would struggle to do that because it's an internal demand. I must brush my teeth, and there could be resistance to teeth brushing because it's something we should do. Whenever there's a should, a demand, you must do this, whether it's come from somebody else or whether it's come internally from ourselves. Somebody struggling with demand avoidance would struggle to motivate themselves to do it and might downright resist it. One of my passions as a counsellor is helping people who are stuck in patterns of self-blame, or seeing that come out in relationships, for example. And something really vital with demand avoidance is that a person isn't choosing to resist. It's not a pleasant experience for their very being, their brain, to resist doing things that they should do or must do, or someone or their internal process has told them to do. And it can be easy to come up with a narrative. Let's say you're a parent with a child at home who is a PDA, as being difficult, resistant, naughty, whereas they're not. It's not a choice to be avoiding a demand. The next trait is one of my real interests, and we could do an entire video just talking about this. It's sensory sensitivities. So sensory sensitivities are usually more associated with autism, but a significant amount of ADHDers also have sensory sensitivities, and also a significant amount of ADHDers also have autism, and vice versa, which we will cover in a little bit. So sensory sensitivities are where some of our senses are either oversensitive, hypersensitive, or undersensitive, hyposensitive, compared to a neurotypical person. And there are many senses, the 5 that you'd obviously think of, sight, smell, hearing, touch, taste. But there are lots of other senses as well, such as the sense of balance, knowing where our hands are in relation to the rest of our body, our feelings, the sense of interoception, so being able to be aware of our internal processes, like how tired we are. Time perception is a big one in ADHD, knowing how long things take and how much time has gone by. ADHDers may find that their perception of senses are either heightened or lowered compared to a neurotypical person, and these might also vary depending on how stressed we are. I mentioned that feelings are one of our sensory sensitivities, and I also mentioned that emotional regulation is one of the executive functions. So ADHDers may find that their emotions are heightened or reduced compared to a neurotypical. They may also find that there is a delay in their emotional processing, as though something happens and it takes a while before the feelings associated with it kick in, which can really result in burnout from something that happened a while ago. In her book, which I realise is reversed because it's a selfie camera, Ellie Middleton talks a little bit about permeance. So object permeance is being able to remember something that is there when it's not there. Classic example, if we have our keys out of sight, we might lose them. It's the reason that physical planners might be better than having something on the phone, because if we can see it, we can remember it. And it's the reason why ADHDers' desks may be a little bit more messy, because if the things are present and physical, then they can be remembered. They don't disappear, they don't lose their permeance. But something I found interesting she talked about was emotional permeance. So remembering that somebody loves us, that we are safe with a person, that we're trusted. If that isn't present, that it's easy to forget. It's not that there's a sense of blame with this emotional regulation, but more forgetting that sense of security within a person. Noradrenaline and dopamine are both neurotransmitters that are impacted by ADHD. We talked about impulsivity both as a diagnostic symptom but also as an executive function, and we talked about the interest-led brain wanting to go after things that are a little bit challenging or interesting. So all of these contributing factors can impact on risk-taking, on doing things that are exciting, impulsive, maybe even a little bit crazy. Can be part of a reason why there is a lot of susceptibility to addiction, and we'll talk about comorbidities in a little bit, but risk-taking can be quite common in ADHD, which isn't so much about being adventurous or wanting to push the boat, and more about just trying to regulate neurotransmitter levels. ADHD very much affects focus, so much so that the first part of it is the term attention deficit talks about focus. If I went on a walk around a wood, no music, no distractions, my mind would start to be creative, start to be busy. I would think about ideas for reels, I would think about things in my life, I'd make plans, my mind would be active. Whereas if I was doing something that I was focused on, if I'm more reading a book or making this video, my thoughts are quite direct. It's thinking about this thing. The ADHD brain is more like my brain is in the wood, so thinking, only constantly. The sense of thoughts, ideas, they're going around a lot. So it's not that focus isn't present, it's more that there's a lot of information to process on. That sensory gating of switching those things off isn't there to the same extent. ADHDers can also reach a sort of flow state, if you've heard of that word, called hyperfocus, and that's being able to really diligently focus on things that meet interests, so much so that time can run away with them and they can become totally engaged with an activity. So there's this interesting continuum on focus between struggling to focus with attention versus hyperfocus. And then the final thing I'm going to talk about is stimming. Stimming is a repetitive motion, or it can also be like singing or making noises, for example, a repetitive motion that we do. I, for example, will quite often play with my hair, and that's why you'll see me with a little tuft like that in a lot of videos, because I keep stimming by playing with it. Stimming is something, again, that's very associated with autism, and often stimming in autism is about managing anxiety levels and being able to focus our sensory needs on one thing. And that might be the case with ADHD as well, whereas ADHDers will quite often be stimming to concentrate hyperactivity, to concentrate focus and energy into one thing. It provides a vessel to be able to focus, in the same way that you might have heard it said that if you chew gum while you're doing an exam, it can help you to concentrate. I've mentioned autism a few times, and I think now is the point to talk about comorbidities, because ADHD is rarely just ADHD. It will also make us more susceptible to other physical health conditions, other mental health conditions, other neurotypes. There's more to it than just one diagnosis that impacts on our identity. It's multiple things. So autism, for example, let's talk about other neurotypes first. ADHDers are 2 to 5 times more likely to also be autistic, or ADHD, AU, They're 4 to 5 times more likely to be dyspraxic. They are 3 to 10 times more likely to have either tics or Tourette's. They have higher incidences of OCD. They have higher incidences of dyslexia. Someone once said to me that neurodivergent conditions are a little bit like a bog off, a buy one get one free. If you have one neurodivergent condition, quite likely have another neurotype. There are behavioural conditions that are much more common in ADHD than outside of it. I already mentioned addiction, but also risk-taking, sleep disorders, eating disorders. All of these are more common. There are mental health conditions that are more common, which again might be because of the neurodivergent itself, or it might be more because of how ADHDers are treated. But depression is 2 to 8 times more common. Anxiety disorders are 2 to 5 times more common. Bipolar is 3 to 10 times more common. And then we've got our physical health conditions that are more common in ADHD, such as cardiovascular conditions, restless leg syndromes, migraines, hyperflexibility. It's being able to really move, and that can lead us into injury. GI issues, stomach issues, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD, really severe period and mood issues, very common in ADHD, chronic pain, obesity, and hyperthyroidism. So very, very real physical health impacts of being an ADHDer. So the final bit of education in this talk is going to go over the social model of neurodiversity, or the social model of disability. Up until now, you may have noticed that most of this talk has been going on around impairments, struggles, difficulties. By listing the challenges that ADHDers face, I'm at risk of sounding less affirming. And I think it's been important for me to talk about the struggles, the differences, in order to help us understand ADHDers, if we are an ADHDer, in order to be able to accept parts of us that we cannot change. But in looking at deficits or impairments or challenges, the risk is that it is less affirming, less accepting, more of a medical basis of talking about ADHD. The social model of neurodivergence challenges this medical model. It says that disability isn't caused by challenges, limitations. Instead, disability is caused by society and inaccessibility. It's not that ADHDers have issues and support needs, it's that they live in a neurotypical world which isn't generally built for them. If you check out my YouTube channel and you go to the playlist that this video is in, the Autism and Neurodivergence playlist, you will find a video with lots of pictures of my cat Ozzy, he's wonderful. You'll find a video that says, "I am not disordered, I'm a hunter." And it talks a lot about how hyperfocus would be really useful if we were hunting, if we were going out and able to fixate on our prey, to follow it, to be aware of other things until we've found what we're searching for, and then being able to really diligently risk take and come after it. A lot of ADHD traits would be really beneficial if we were a hunter. In the same way, imagine that we're a shaman in our village. Imagine that we are an autistic shaman. How useful would it be for us to be able to create rituals that help people to undergo journeys, to be able to look at the rest of the tribe with an objectiveness that questions things that the rest of the tribe just go with? We would be really useful if we were a shaman. It's this sort of thinking that neurodivergent conditions aren't wrong, they're not defective, there's not an issue with them. They're just different, and given the right environment that is inclusive, ADHDers would thrive and not be considered impaired like the medical model makes them out to be. I am a dyslexic, and at times that can be ruddy annoying when I am spell checking all my articles for the 10th time, or getting confused between words, or confusing left and right and east and west. Those all seem to muddle me. Or forgetting names, all these kind of negatives associated with them. But if I wasn't a dyslexic, I don't think I would be quite as reflective. And if I wasn't reflective, I wouldn't make shorts. I wouldn't be me. I'm proud to be a dyslexic, which has taken a while to get to. In the same way, I've talked a lot about impairments in this, but I hope that you can also reach a place of being proud of your beautiful neurodivergent brain, however it is, rather than seeing as it's just impaired or a burden. It's not. It's perfect. It's made the way it should be. It has a place. It's just trying to exist in a world that isn't tailored for it. I've been quite avid the last couple of months on podcasts, YouTube, shows, occasional talk, different things relating to ADHD. I've been interested, I've wanted to know more about it. And because lots of these things are podcasts or shows, it's hard for me to reference everything that's gone into this talk or the previous experiences, etc. But I do want to reference two sources. The first is a website, ADHD Adult, that's adhdadults.co.uk. Gained a couple of resources, some of the stats, like the stats about prevalences of mental health or physical health conditions in ADHD, those were taken from that site. And the other source I want to quote is, having just finished Ellie Middleton's book Unmasked, I really enjoyed it, and a lot of the content from that book has inspired this talk. So really recommend reading the book. It's quite accessible. She also has a YouTube channel, really worthwhile just checking out her channel and hearing her. She's easy to listen to. I also want to be a bit humble and say that, I've had a couple of months of being really interested in books or podcasts, etc. on ADHD, but I'm not trying to claim to be an expert. I just want you to be able to better understand yourself, to love yourself a bit more, to blame yourself a little bit less. And so I may well have got some things wrong. I might have missed the mark. I might have said stuff that's propagating old ideas that are a bit outdated and a bit too medical. And I want to acknowledge that, probably apologise a little bit if I'm misspreading information that isn't helpful. And so please do drop in the comments if there are any thoughts, any things that I've said which are maybe a little bit off the mark, or stuff that could be a little bit more helpful. Last t-shirt change. My name is Simon Hughes. I am a person-centred counsellor who works online, through telephone, or does home visits or sees people in my office in Oxford, UK. I offer a relational approach to therapy to try and help people draw out from themselves the ability to find healing and progress. My real interest is people who are stuck in patterns of self-blame, and that comes up one hell of a lot in neurodivergence. I mean, autism is what I work with most, and autists can bloody blame themselves a lot without recognising that a lot of things they're not our faults. And this comes up with ADHD too. So I work a lot with self-blame. That happens a lot in grief, in neurodivergence, in addiction, in bereavement. That's kind of what makes my heart go. I'm also a content creator. That feels a strange thing to say about myself, but I'm a content creator. I make 3 shorts a week over on this channel on YouTube, and you can also follow me on Facebook at Simon's Listening Counselling Services. Finally, I have a website, www.simonslistening.co.uk, where you can read this as an article and read many other things as an article with the video embedded. You can contact me if you're interested in having counselling. I would love to journey with you. Feel free to email me. I am simonslistening@protonmail.com, or my number is 0774 9870502, or just check out my socials. Do subscribe, comment, like. I would love to read your thoughts, and I'm quite a small channel, so I usually comment back to whatever people say. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I realise this has been quite long compared to my other videos, but thank you for taking the time to listen. And my hope, what I would really like, is for you to have got something out of this. I would really love it if we could slightly move that sense of blame or lostness, and if you could really love yourself a bit more. Thank you, and have a really good day.